You tell me when we're ready to go.
We're ready to go.
Okay. Welcome, St. Louis U High. Good to see you all. We're especially greeting the Upward Bound students of 2020. We wish you were with you in person, but we're doing what we can to connect you to the experience of Upward Bound. My name is Jim Linhares. I'm the assistant principal for mission at St. Louis U High. I work with supporting a lot of the teachers, but every summer for the last 20 years, I've been a field biologist working with students in the wild, whether it's the wild of the city, where we happen to be now, or the wild of rural Missouri, where we typically went with our students on field biology field trips. And though we miss you all, our thought was to bring you along on one of the experiences that we might have had we all been together, and maybe by showing you that experience, you'll be tempted to get out there in the wild and do a hike yourselves and become a field biologist. So welcome to a hike with Backer Memorial in the background. We'd like you to join us on a little outing and see if we can have some fun. With me is my longtime friend and associate in Walkabout and Upward Bound, Dr. David Callon. David, good to see you, good to be with you.
Thank you. I get to teach English here at St. Louis University High School, and I grew up down in Arkansas, where being outside was just really important to me. And what I love about working here at SLUH is right next door in Forest Park, I've got this unimaginably rich wilderness right next to me. I don't need to drive 5 hours or 1 hour to like get out and hit the trail or see birds or experience nature. I mean, I've got it right here. And so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna hopefully take you on an adventure that will help you begin to see like the wilderness, the amazing variety of things that you can see wherever you live in St. Louis, because they're all around us. And so tapping into that awareness is one of our goals today. So thanks for joining us on this adventure.
If you had been in Upward Bound, and whether you're in Upward Bound or not in person, here's one of the key things that we try to say. Learn through experience. We don't talk about field biology in Upward Bound. We ask you to become the field biologist. So in that spirit, we'd both invite you to becoming one with us, and we'd urge you after you see this to maybe go out into your own backyard and perhaps on a hike with family or friends to be one yourself. Our first stop in a minute is going to be with an old friend of ours whom Dr. Callon reacquainted me with over the years in this Upward Bound program.
All right, let's head out. So if you go to St. Louis University High School, you know a whole lot about Forest Park. And if you know about Forest Park, you know about the little journey it takes to get to Forest Park. And no journey to Forest Park happens without passing by Old Pops here. In fact, Old Pops has been here longer than St. Louis University High School has been here. Old Pops has been here longer than this highway has been here. Old Pops has seen a lot of changes. Now this is a cottonwood tree. It's a great American tree. It loves shady, moist, rich soil. It loves to grow near water, and we're right on the banks of the mighty River de Pere here, so it's had a lot of that over the years. I call him Old Pops, and I call him an old friend because for years, when I took off running in Forest Park or I took my team, I didn't always like carrying my keys in my pocket all the way, but I needed my keys to get back in. And so I found in these great, fantastic roots a place to always throw my keys down, and every single time I came back, my keys were always here. So Old Pops, you know he's got your back. Now you might have heard me say the word cottonwood tree, because this is exactly what grows. This is how this tree propagates. It uses a cotton-like substance that floats in the air to disseminate its seeds. You've seen this all over St. Louis. You might be allergic to it. Populus deltoides would be our Latin name for the cottonwood tree, but whatever it's called, it's been a great friend of mine, and I'm glad we got a chance to pay it a visit here right outside of St. Louis University High School.
So we're only a couple of 100 yards from where we were downhill visiting with old Pops right now. But in the hike that we did with Upward Bound, it was almost one of my favorite stops, because most of the world you and I spend our time in is urban or suburban. And we don't think of that as being wilderness, but it really is or could be. And we're in a great example of that right now. You've got a drainage ditch behind me. Behind that is Highway 40. And of course, behind that is the magnificent Barnes Jewish Medical Complex. You'd hardly associate that with wilderness. And yet there was a little bit of wisdom involved in designing this culvert. You'll see there are plants growing up in it, characteristic of wetlands. They're cattails. And now that the cattails are established, certain other plants and animals, and especially one of my favorite friends from the natural world, is hanging out there because we've got a little swamp. So you may see him, he's just passing by just down below, the red-winged blackbird, named for the bright red stripe on his shoulder that you can see from 100 yards off. He also has a call, and we just heard it there, kind of a wee. It's one of the most easily recognizable calls in the bird world, and it's full of cheer and joy, and it means a summer day to me. So the red-winged blackbird and a swamp right here on the edge of the wilderness, a great place to be a field biologist, though we're only a couple of 100 yards from St. Louis U High, and we're not even in the park yet.
So I'm out here at one of the busiest intersections in the entire St. Louis metro region. I'm virtually on top of I-64. Barnes Jewish Hospital is right next to me. The traffic at Kings Highway is buzzing. And the world is growing up a little bit. And if you take a look around me, you get a nice little glimpse of a tall grass prairie that would have just covered this area. This would have been what St. Louis looked like not so long ago, actually. Our strategy for the last several decades has been pave it, mow it, tame it, right? But we're getting a little bit wiser. We're starting to realize that not only is it more beautiful to let some of these plants come back, but that these plants have a relationship to various insects and birds and animals that are really important for their health and their survival. So we can get really creative with even these small urban spaces to let things like coreopsis grow, or blazing star, or field oats, right? And then there's this beauty of growing up in a world in which everything has a name and that you can never stop learning about it. So just a little thing on the way to the park.
So on that same theme, we're at a super cool place right here. A place that, frankly, when I was a boy or even 15 years ago, wasn't established with the drama that it has now. What they've really done, these enlightened minds that have redesigned Forest Park, is they've tried to reacquaint us with the story of what this place is. Again, Barnes Jewish Hospital is just over there. But what they've done is they've reestablished the banks of the Des Peres River, which once upon a time flowed through a swamp on the edge of Missouri, on the edge of St. Louis, I should say. So St. Louis develops in waves. Where St. Louis's settled edge was, the swamp began, and River Des Peres flowed through. And now, these many years later, in the midst of a much wider metro area, they've reestablished the banks of the Des Peres. So it flows through the swamp, and then underneath Highway 40, where it's then buried in great big tunnels. It's still there, but underground, between the Science Center and St. Louis U High. But just to turn our attention back to the park, they've recreated a swamp habitat that we're going to see in just a moment that's gloriously beautiful. It didn't used to exist. Most of the time, when I was an adult, I thought of Forest Park as a rather sad, sort of faded glory sort of a place. But through the kind of development that Dr. Callon was talking about a few minutes ago, that enlightened sense of place and the natural world, it's been reestablished. Spectacular.
Hey, if you were ice skating or fishing in Forest Park just over the way, your car would just be a few yards from here. What you might not realize is that there is a tall grass prairie in abundance, right? And one of my favorite plants out here, it's like an old friend you can have a conversation with. He's your height. He's got a lot of flesh and bone to him, is milkweed. And I know you've heard of milkweed before because you've probably been reading and hearing about the monarch butterfly in school, right? And the efforts that we're making to bring that butterfly back. Now, that butterfly needs, as all pollinators do, a lot of flowers to eat, but there's a special plant that it needs for its eggs and its larvae, so that as they grow, they can eat only this leaf, right? And when we tear this out, we start losing those species, right? It turns out they have a reason for being here. Another reason for being here is for our good friend, the milkweed beetle. And he's a little lazy, but he's like a big ladybug, right? Turns out there are 28 different species of the milkweed beetle, and each of them have a relationship with another species of milkweed. And I wish I could tell you the name of these particular species, but I think it's enough to know this flower and these majestic leaves, which look how good they are at catching the rain, funneling that water right back to the stalk to feed this plant. How good it is at adapting and just being itself, right? Seems like there's a great lesson for all of us in that. We've been caught in a bit of a drama here between a whole lot of species of birds in one place. You generally don't see that. You generally don't see one tree with 3 or 4 kinds of birds. But we spotted some fledgling red-winged blackbirds that look like they can't quite fly yet, and a much smaller little bird, and we've got some great shots of it here to show you. A smaller little bird, which we think is a gnatcatcher, but we're gonna have to double check that. And then in the middle of all, a cowbird that might have actually laid its eggs in another bird's nest, and it may just be that there are competing species all seeking shelter in the same space, and they're not too happy about it. It's kind of like some of our families at Thanksgiving. Part of the beauty, and frankly one of the skills that takes time to learn about being outside and is learning to slow down and just pay attention and listen and look for the story, because there's a story, and there are stories happening all around us.
So we're getting an opportunity to watch a heron hunting in the shallows right behind me. You'll notice they move really slowly and deliberately, craning that neck around, looking below the surface of the water for fish. And then if we're lucky enough, we'll see them wait for a strike. You've got long black legs that are mostly submerged there, and then that amazing long neck which can stretch way above the water. A creature astonishingly designed for exactly what it's doing. And here we are this close to be able to observe it. We're incredibly lucky to have a visit with the great egret here in Forest Park.
I've been having some hard traveling, I thought you knowed. I've been having some hard traveling way down the road. I've been having some hard traveling, hard
You know, when you're a
hard
kid,
gambling. I've been
it's just green stuff, right? What do you see? I see plants. What do those plants look like? Well, they're green, right? And then as you get older, but sometimes too, with the eye of a child, you begin to see the variety, right? And yet, there's so much to learn, and everybody has to start somewhere. And for me, and for a lot of guys in Upward Bound, we start right here with an old friend, Virginia creeper. Now, some of you may be really nervous that I'm even touching this. It's a vine, it's growing up the side of a tree, it's got 3, 4 something leaves, you know, oh my God, is that poison ivy, right? And that's a great thought, right? But this one, it turns out, has 5. And it's a super common plant everywhere in Missouri, heck, almost everywhere you go in the Midwest, the eastern United States. And it's called Virginia creeper because it's really good at doing what it says, creeping along the ground, creeping up fence lines, creeping up this beautiful red cedar tree here. And it's got these really distinctive sort of spade-like jagged leaves. And there's always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spread out like the palms of your hand, right? In that kind of distance, right? And then you start there. You think, well, I know Virginia creeper, right? And then another great place to go from here would be poison ivy. So we'll see if we can find some here in just a minute.
You know, Judge said to me, it's 90 days for vagrancy, and I've been hitting some hard traveling, Lord.
All right, virtual Upward Bound students, if you didn't listen to anything up to now, could you please tune in on this one? Because I may save you a little bit of discomfort, and you may be able to save your family and friends. Right behind me, creeping up this spectacular sycamore tree, from the base of it up, looks like 25, 30, maybe even higher feet, is the bane of the naturalist's existence, poison ivy. A moment ago we encountered Virginia creeper. This would have been lesson number 2 in Upward Bound. Take a close look at this leaf, because for as many leaves of 3 let it be people as there are out there are a lot of leaflets of 3. And there's too many different kinds of plants that look close to it to let them all be. You've got to know this one, and you've got to know it at close range. 3 leaflets, an irregular toothed leaf. Some of them have what appears to be a little thumb on one of the outside leaflets, making it look sort of like a mitten. The problem is it can be small, or it can be large, it can be under your feet, or it can be in your face. But get a good long look at poison ivy. Burn it into your mind, and you'll be doing everybody and yourself a big favor.
Hole sucking, 6 foot of mud and the show been a mucking, and I've been having some hard traveling, Lord.
You know, this is one of my favorite trails in all of Forest Park, because it's a lot like what Forest Park would have been like before the swamp was cleared for the World's Fair. Lowland, swampy land near the river, which is just a few paces that way. What I also love about this little trail is it's kind of a secret. There are a number of these in Forest Park, but this is one of them. We could be deep in the Ozarks. I love coming here sometimes just to clear my head and to feel a little bit of the solitude that I think we all crave. Glad you guys paused to come along with us in your day.
Man, we have covered a lot of territory though. We've left our school, we've seen swamp, we've seen lowland forest, we've seen aquatic, we've seen prairie, and I guess you just don't have to go very far from home, right? And if there's one thing we could invite you to do to be a part of the Upward Bound tradition, right, is to spend a little time wherever you are, you know, a park near your house, and go with a different agenda other than just to maybe play soccer or see how fast you can run around, but to see what you can notice, right? It turns out wherever you are, there's just amazing things to notice. I've just picked underneath from me one of my favorite scraggly weeds. Turns out it's called plantain, and it's great in salads. And the Native Americans who lived on the banks of this mighty river De Pere, these were the staples of their daily life, right? Or field clover, the clover flower, which is really sweet, right? It turns out that the more time that you spend sometimes just slowing down and being with creation, the more time you start figuring out what it is to be alive, what it means to be you, what it means to be a creature created by a wonderful God that created all the rest of this stuff for a purpose. Being out here helps remind me what that purpose is when I forget. If you want to change the world, you have to know the world. And that might start with the red-winged blackbird. That might start with the honey locust tree or the plantain, right? But it builds from there to begin to understand networks and systems so that you can be the person that you were created to be, to help create the world that we envision to be God's kingdom.
I want to quote Mr. Kevin McKernan, the teacher of improv here at St. Louis U High. If you come, you'll be in his class. It's a kick. He's really good at coaching even shy people into improv. But he has this thing that he says about SLUH that I really feel is true. He says, we do the cool stuff. And it's important to keep doing the cool stuff. And he means by that really that we invite adolescents to step out of a, hey, we create these things for kids and they're there for kids, into the adult world, into the adult stage, to be a field biologist, to be someone on a stage in a theater, to be a scholar, to be an athlete with some spectacular facilities on which to perform. So I just want you guys to know, as a dad, as a teacher, and a coach for many years, and now as an administrator trying to support people like Dr. Callon, SLUH is a cool place where cool work gets done. And you may not be into field biology, but I can almost guarantee you that a niche that is you, that could become you, you're going to find right behind us here at St. Louis U High. Thanks for being along on this hike. We're sorry you couldn't be with us on Upward Bound. Please stay connected to St. Louis U High and reach out to us with your questions, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation.
And a challenge. If you've watched this video and you've gone out on your own hike, send us your pictures. Send them to admissions@sluh.org. Send them to me, Dr. Callon, or to Miss Linhares. You can find us on the website, but share it out with us.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll share it out with the rest of the world as well.
Start right in your own backyard. Thanks, Upward Bounders.
Thank you.